Hello, Singapore. How you all doing? So I'm even more excited than usual to be here for a personal reason. Before I joined Google, I spent about 10 years living in Singapore when I was working in the telco industry. And I've been living in Australia the past couple of years, but in 2 weeks' time, I'll be moving back to Singapore. So thank you all for coming to my homecoming party here today. Enough about me. What are we talking about today? The topic I have is migrating and modernizing and building the journey that works best for you in Google Cloud. Now, it says Google Cloud right there, but I'll actually tell you a little secret. The content today is not just about GCP. It actually applies to any cloud at all. Now, of course, personally, I do hope you'll choose GCP, and I'll also give you a couple of tips about various products and services that we at GCP offer to make your migration journey a bit easier. So let's start by looking at what is actually driving migration. What are the forces moving companies towards the cloud? So what we've seen is that enterprises, companies like yours, they've made tremendous investments in infrastructure. That means compute, storage, networking, data, and investing in application development. But the issue many of you are facing is that the demands on your business keep on growing. You're being asked to unlock capability through data analytics. You're being asked to apply machine learning to business problems. And as these demands on the business grow, the demands on the infrastructure also grow. But of course, the challenge is that it's expensive to build and maintain and upgrade all this infrastructure. According to a recent survey or a study done by Gartner, enterprises today are on average spending 70% of their IT budget just on keeping the lights on. So this is not money which is driving the business forward. It really is just maintaining what you have. So the dilemma you have is how do you modernize, how do you unlock new capability, but you cannot also just simultaneously ignore your existing applications. So how do you optimize and streamline to focus on these new needs that you have? So we think that the cloud is a really great enabler. It's a chance for you to change your investment footprint. But given how large many organizations are, it can be challenging to figure out where to start. So it's really important to take a moment to just reflect on what are the goals and what are priorities for moving to the cloud for your company or organization. Are you looking to increase productivity? Do you want to create value, reduce costs, drive innovation, improve efficiency? These will all have very different implications for how you actually approach your migration. So my goal really for the talk today is to walk you through some very practical, very hands-on frameworks that will hopefully help you on your migration journey. And so if you take away one thing today, it probably should be this one here, that migrations don't have to be everything at once. So let's talk a bit for a moment about Migration 101. So what is migration? How do you actually do migrations? So let's start by where we are, where most of us are today. So what the landscape today is, basically we're on the lower left side here. So most of our applications, most systems are on-premises, and they're what we call classic or legacy applications. These are monolithic applications built in-house. These are traditional packaged apps coming from third-party vendors. And where we want to go in the business is we think the trend is going towards the top right side there, so where your applications are cloud native and they're running in the public cloud. And this unlocks a whole bunch of benefits. So you get more productive developers, you have more portable systems, you have more easier scalability, it's more available, it's more efficient, you pay for use, and security comes built in to some extent. Now, of course, the million-dollar question here is how do you actually get from square A to square B? And the way we see it, there are really three main paths that you can choose to take. So the first strategy is lift and shift. So this is probably the most straightforward way to do it. And the idea, this really just means you take your application and you move it without making any major changes from on-prem into the cloud. And this already unlocks some fairly big wins. So the obvious one is that you no longer need to worry about physical infrastructure because the cloud provider, like Google, handles that. So no more provisioning, no more managing, no more upgrading. Simple practical example, Intel recently rolled out their latest Cascade Lake CPUs, which Google is also rolling out across data centers, which means you can access these simply by flicking a switch and saying, yes, we want our next VM to have these. Another immediate benefit is that you only pay for what you use. So in the on-prem world, it's good practice actually to over-provision intentionally, leave some capacity in case you need it in the future. But you don't need to worry about this in the cloud because you can always just spin up more capacity as needed. So lift and shift, it's not the most sexy approach, but it often is the most pragmatic approach. So some good use cases for using this is if you have applications which can run as is, unmodified in the cloud. So this might include third-party vendors, software, where you don't have the source code, or even applications you built yourselves, which were built a while ago. Maybe the developer team is no longer around. It may not be possible, may not make sense to rewrite these applications. And also, while lift and shift, it's a good first step, it actually also unlocks the natural next step, which is to modernize your workload by moving to a fully managed service. So instead of having your own database, which you need to always provision and scale and back up and upgrade, you can move to a managed service like Cloud SQL, for example, for MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL, or Cloud Memory Store for Redis, Memcache, Cloud Dataproc for Hadoop and Spark. There's many options in the cloud. Now, the second strategy is the improve and move strategy. So the idea here is that instead of moving your workload as is, you actually take some time to modernize it in place on premises, and only then you take the second step to move to the cloud. A pretty common path that we're seeing for this is to actually containerize your applications. So you separate the application from the operating system, and then you can start using Kubernetes to actually automate your deployment and management. And with Anthos or hybrid platform, this strategy is more viable than ever. So some typical cases where you actually want to use this is, for example, if your current infra is not supported as is in the cloud, typical use case, maybe it's tied to a storage system like a SAN or a NAS, which doesn't quite map one-to-one to cloud, so you need to do some changes to make it work. Or maybe you're already rewriting an application to meet some new requirements. So we have a product called Anthos Migrate, which I'll mention later as well, which can let you automatically migrate your applications into containers, and then they can be managed as containers and run on-prem or in the cloud. The third and final strategy is rebuild, also known as rip and replace. So the basic idea here is that you actually re-architect. You build a new application using the latest cloud-native technologies, and once it's up and running and tested, you throw away the old one. And this now unlocks the most benefits of the cloud because the resulting application is fully cloud-native and has all these benefits available. But it also is the most expensive approach. This will take the most time and effort on your part. So this is usually not applied to everything. You need to use this strategically for some key workloads. A couple of common use cases. If, for example, you have an application which is currently not meeting its goals and you don't see a clear pathway forward, if you're looking to rewrite the application anyway, it makes a lot of sense to just have hit two birds with one stone and rebuild this in the cloud from day one. Another common use case is if the application is not worth maintaining. Like, for example, let's say you have some hardware which is reaching end of life or end of lease, or you have a very expensive proprietary software package coming up for a multi-year license renewal. And it might make sense, instead of putting millions of dollars into renewing that and getting locked in there, maybe you can take the money and invest that in building in the cloud again instead. So the key takeaway here really is that it's not one size fits all. So a typical company enterprise, you'll have tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of workloads, and there's not going to be one path which fits all of them. So you need to tailor the path you choose, the strategy you choose, to the specific workload that you have. So much for the theory. Let's start looking at some more practical, concrete examples of how you actually would get started on this migration journey. So it's probably tempting to just jump in and start migrating stuff, but given the complexity that can be involved, we've actually seen that following this approach is really going to help you have a more successful migration. So you need to take some time out right in the beginning to assess your landscape, plan exactly what you're going to migrate and how and in what order, only then do the actual migration, and then also spend some time optimizing after the migration is complete. So let's look at the assessment first. So here we have a bunch of factors which all make it easier to migrate your application to the cloud. Now, I'm not going to read out all of these, and you're not going to have an application which ticks all of these boxes, but you're looking for applications which tick as many of these as possible. So when you're starting out, you're really looking for applications which are not business critical, are not edge cases, will be useful for future migrations, and basically are a bit more tolerant to the disruption that may be involved in a migration. And the key really is to iterate and learn and solve problems incrementally. Here are some more practical examples of like how typical applications fall on the complexity spectrum. So when you're starting out in your migration, you really want to focus here on the left side, on applications which are disconnected and non-critical. So for example, a marketing website, if it goes down for a while, it's not nice, but it's not going to have much impact on the rest of your business. And that's a good one to start with. Things like backups and archives, tests, dev environments, experiments. So once you feel comfortable with these, you can move on to the middle section. These are systems which are connected, but not quite so critical as well. So batch processing, usually a good place to start because you can schedule when a batch job runs. You have some flexibility there. Also back office tasks and data analysis, especially if it's not real time. And once you're comfortable with the middle section, you can move on to the most complicated ones over here on the right side, which is things like, for example, online transaction processing, which typically is tightly coupled to many of our systems and is very critical for the functioning of the business. Now, when you're assessing your landscape, you're not alone. So we have a number of partners we can recommend to help you navigate your way through this. So a couple of offerings I wanted to call out. So if you're doing dependency mapping, so both Cloudomize and Stratozone can help you figure out what your actual dependencies are. So you're not relying on the architecture diagram you drew 15 years ago. This is where the traffic is actually flowing between your systems. And also, if you're interested in total cost of ownership, or TCO, Cloud Physics, Cloudomize, Stratozone, they can all help you figure out where are the low-hanging fruit, where you actually can make the biggest savings by moving over. So once you have an idea of what your landscape looks like, you can actually start to plan out your actual migration. But the first step is not to migrate, it really is to build a cloud foundation. So this basically is the name. It's called a foundation because, like a house, it underlies what everything else is going to be built on. And it consists of 4 pillars. These are identity, network, security, and billing. And what really ties all these together is these are all things which are fairly straightforward to build out initially, but they can be quite difficult to change afterwards. So it really is worth it to spend some time getting these right as you go along, so you can have a solid foundation to build on in the future. So some examples include things like the IAM policies, your users, your roles, the hierarchy of resources, your networks, like what firewall rules you have, what your subnets are, IP ranges, security policies for organization, and even things like billing and monitoring, so you can assign costs accurately to the teams actually using the resources. And once the foundation is in place, you actually can start doing the migration in waves. And we really encourage you to start with the easy systems, like the lift and shifts, for example, the non-critical systems. And the goal really is to build confidence in the cloud and migration. And then you can slowly ramp up. You can migrate more systems, and you can migrate more complicated systems. And the goal really is to learn as you go. So what you want to do is you want to build what we call an agile migration factory. So this is a smooth process run by an experienced team, which you can rely on to migrate your workloads. So simple cyclical pattern. So you prepare the migration, you do the actual migration, you test and verify, then you take the lessons, what went well, what didn't go so well, and you feed that into the next wave. And this way, you can even have 1,000 workloads to go through. You can grind it down slowly, first 20 at a time, 50 at a time, 100 at a time, and just migrate everything by the end. Now, one thing I need to call out is it's easy to think that migration is purely a technical problem, but it really is also a cultural issue as well. So it's very important to have the entire business on board. You need to make sure the line of business owners, the migration owners, networking, security, infrastructure, finance, they all have to be on board with what you're doing. You need to sync with the cross-functional teams early and often. And this also can be a big culture change, and even a personal challenge for many people. I mean, there will be people in organizations who have spent, a large part of their careers, owning a system on-prem, and they may feel threatened. It's like, what does this mean for me? It's like, what's going to happen to me in the future? And it's important to convey to them that, this is actually an opportunity for you. This is a chance for you to upskill, to stay relevant in the future cloud world. So you need to identify champions who can really help drive this home, this message. Then this is actually an opportunity for you. You can move away from just keeping the lights on and move into innovating and adding value to the company and driving their careers forward and the company forward. So once your plan is in place, you can start to do the actual migration. So I want to call out some tools that we have in GCP to help make your life easier. So first of all is Velostrada, which is our VM migration product. The core goal here really is to move existing virtual machines into GC, this compute engine, or VM offering. So some key benefits is that you can migrate a VM in as little as 10 minutes with this. You can do automation, so you can script batches of VMs to migrate easily. And you can also minimize the risk of migration with built-in testing and easy rollback paths if things don't go as planned. And you also have the option to optimize your cloud costs with right-sizing. So again, on-premises, you often have extra capacity built in on purpose. Velostrada will help you analyze what the actual usage of your virtual machines is and downscale accordingly as you move to the cloud. Another offering we have is Anthos Migrate. So this is our offering which actually can take both physical servers on bare metal and VMs directly into containers, after which they can be managed by Kubernetes or GK or Anthos. So this really reduces the complexity of migration. And now it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to take a legacy application and magically make it 100% cloud native, but it will unlock some benefits from the get-go, which is because now they're containerized, you don't have the overhead of having the OS there, so you can pack more densely, you no longer have VM management, and it gives you more time and energy to spend on high-impact projects. So in addition to just VMs, you also will have other applications, including databases to migrate. So Google has recently acquired a company called Illuma, who are experts on database migration. So stay tuned for more as we integrate Illuma into the GCP family. And when you're done, you're actually not done just yet, because you also have optimization. So you're never really finished as an actual fact, but you can keep evolving. And here are some points to bear in mind, like once your migration is actually done for a given system. So you want to make sure that you build your team, that you can monitor what's happening where, and you can figure out where to make improvements. You can automate more. You can save time from doing routine work. You can codify, and you can take full advantage of more cloud-native approaches and tools. So one more thing I want to focus on a bit is the optimization part in terms of cost. So a recent study by RightScale has estimated that 35% of all spending in public cloud is wasted, which means you just have resources running there serving no useful purpose. And on GCP, we actually offer a number of things out of the box to help you reduce this waste. So I already mentioned we have the pre-migration right-sizing. So from the get-go, we can help you identify what's the correct size of your VM to migrate. We offer custom machine types, which means that unlike some providers where you're locked into these rigid predefined classes, on GCP you actually can say the exact number of CPUs and the exact amount of memory that you want to best run your workload. So you can scale the machine to the workload exactly. We also offer automatic sustained use discounts. So again, you don't need to lock yourself into a 3-year or even 1-year commitment to get the best price. If you just leave a VM running on GCP, we actually will automatically give you a discount after a couple of weeks have passed and it's been running. So there is 0 effort required on your part. It's just an automatic discount for keeping the VM up and running. And finally, we also offer as a free feature to all customers, we have post-migration right-sizing. So any VM on a compute engine, we actually keep an eye on how much CPU it's using, how much memory it's using. And if over time it looks like you actually have extra capacity in there, we actually will say, it's like, hey, looks like this VM is only using 10% of CPU. Do you want to scale it down? Or vice versa, it's like, hey, the CPU on this one is always pinned to 100%. Maybe you want to increase the VM size. So just a quick recap, some of the top tips we have for you. So when you're doing your migration, find the smartest place to start. This often means like a lift and shift of low criticality VMs. And when you do migrate, make sure you focus on minimizing risk. So you want to have solid testing, and you want to have a clear predefined path to rolling back if something doesn't go right. And this may all seem a bit daunting, but actually is easier than you think when you have the right help, which brings us to my next slide. So Google has a professional services team, the PSO, which is happy to help you on your journey. And there's one offering in particular I want to call out, which is Cloud Sprint. So it's easy to have a workshop, which is, I say in Singapore, it's NATO, no action talk only. This is an action workshop. So the idea is somebody from PSO will come down to you for an entire week, And they will work with you to identify a good workload to migrate. They will build that foundation I mentioned earlier, all the billing, security, all that stuff. And they will actually deploy a live production application into GCP during this. Then they'll review how that went and give you suggestions on how to go from there. So this is a really great program, and I strongly recommend you taking up on this if you are looking to do a migration on GCP. And of course, it's not just PSO who you can lean on. We also have many partners who can help you on your journey. And here are some probably familiar logos, and you actually will find quite a few of them at the summit right outside of the booths here today. But rather than just hearing tips from me, I think it would be good to hear from a customer who actually has been going through this journey themselves firsthand. So I would like to invite on stage Florentin Lenoir, or Flo, Chief of Staff at Lendo EFL, to come share his story. Thank you.
Thank you, Yanni. Whoa. Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, this is amazing. I'm very excited and feel very privileged to be here today to talk to you about how we ended up migrating and rethinking our entire architecture with GCP. And so at Lendo EFL, we believe in analytics for social impact. We believe that technology can be used to make the invisible visible. As a result, we built an entire cloud-based technology platform that sits at the center of an entire data ecosystem and that allows banks, financial institutions to really leverage on the power of data to make informed decisions about new and underserved market segments. Now, we do need to collect, process, and analyze billions of data points. As a result, we need to have an architecture that allows us to do so. And so, just like any other startup, we initially started with an idea. We had to go through iteration processes, and our architecture was really reflective of that. And so we started building a first application, move on to the next, thought about some servers to support that, and so on and so forth. In the process, we ended up having many pets. So if you're familiarized with the pets versus cattle model, then you would analyze this as being like the pet models, where eventually every single application, every single service lives attached to its own set of servers. Now, we quickly realized, or after many years actually, that this was not sustainable, was not scalable, was expensive, was actually hard to maintain, and eventually was also lacking transparency. We ended up having servers that we were not really knowing what they were doing. So we had to take a step back and really think about what would an architecture look like that would serve both our clients and us as an organization. And so we then realized that the team that we have, they were starting to be familiarized with Kubernetes. And we then thought about finding a provider that would really be best for managing Kubernetes. And so, as you probably know, Google actually invented Kubernetes. And they did more than just invent Kubernetes. They actually made it simple so that we don't have to manage networking. We don't have to manage storage. And as a result, it also comes with multiple services and microservices that are useful to ensure security, stability in our platform. And that's why, as you would see, starting from the ingress point, we start using load balancing services that help us direct the traffic to the servers that are actually underutilized and have ability to support our services. On top of that, on the far side of the screen, you would see a series of services that we are also using. So, as an example, Stackdriver would help us managing metrics and logs. We would also use, memory store, for example, so that the sessions that we have, that we use, do not need to be disturbed, and they can easily be scaled up and down to accommodate the customer journey. And so, for 4 to 6 weeks, the team really spent time in trying to understand how to migrate best, and eventually were really comfortable that we could proceed with the migration. And so we saw immediate benefits, not only to the fact that we were able to entirely migrate from our previous cloud provider to GCP in less than 2 hours. We also saw a lot of stability, which means that in terms of traffic fluctuations, we were able to see that the platform could really cop up, could be easily and automatically scale up and down. And what we also saw is immediate impacts on our builds, which always makes our CFO happy. And as a result, we were no longer managing 160 servers, but we only had to manage 25 servers. So there were definitely optimization on that level. In addition to that, because now the platform can absorb a lot of the traffic, then the customer journey is actually a lot smoother and leaner for our clients and for the users and the applicants that are going through our services. And I guess finally, in terms of security, there was also a big uplift in that perspective. And so because Google actually take away from us all the in-house management of Kubernetes, we really are able to focus on what we're supposed to do best, meaning building models, algorithms, and making sure that we have customer satisfaction. And another item that I didn't mention here, but we also were very satisfied with the level of support that we actually got from GCP. So for us, it was a pleasant experience to actually migrate and go through that entire journey. This is the end for me. Thank you very much. Yanni, up to you for parting thoughts.
Thank you, Flo. That was amazing insight into a real-life migration to GCP. So we're now reaching the end of my talk, but I wanted to leave you with some parting thoughts about how to go ahead with your migration. So the first thing really is that at the end of the day, you need to choose one cloud to migrate to. The right cloud for you actually might not be one cloud. Maybe you're looking to live in multiple clouds. But when you make your choice of what cloud you want to work with, I encourage you to look at 3 main factors here. So you should be looking at the capabilities. So like, what can that cloud offer you? Can they offer you all the features that you need? You should be looking at openness. Like, do they really believe in open source? Can they let you avoid lock-in? Do they have flexible architectures? Do they give you the freedom to move around? If you change your mind at some day, will that be an option? And last, you want partnership. Like Flo mentioned, that it's really important that you have a company you feel that you can work with that offers you good engineer-to-engineer support. You have relationships with the product management team that lets you go hands-on with the professional services organization. And so it's real partnership. It's not just selling a product. So once you've chosen which target cloud to go to, you need to choose your right migration path. I mean, as discussed earlier, there are many different paths that you can choose. But the things you're really looking for are you want a path which is safe, which is simple, and which is flexible. So safety means that you need to have built-in testing so you can be confident that the migrated service is working as you expect. You want to have things like right-sizing. You want to have a good, clear rollback path so you can move backwards if you need to. It's reliable, and the data is properly synchronized between your on-prem system and your future cloud base. You want to look into simplicity, so there are ways to reduce the manual labor, so how you can automate the migration, how you can reduce the complexity. Is it easy to use? Is it actually possible to use these tools easily to do the migration? And finally, you want to have a flexible offering, a flexible path, so you can actually customize the path that you go down based on the nature of the workload that you want to migrate. And last, definitely not least, please learn from our customers' successes and learn how they overcame their challenge, what took them by surprise. So to avoid these surprises, the first key thing really is to have a thorough assessment. So you need to really understand what your existing landscape looks like, what dependencies you have, and your migration will not succeed if you don't understand where you're coming from, and where you're going to. And for where you're going to, you really need to take some time to craft the right architecture. So you need to do proper in-cloud testing, architecture mapping. And you need to choose the best technologies for each workload that you want to migrate and build around that in the cloud. And once again, migration is not just a technology challenge, it's really also a culture challenge. So you need to build a deep team. So not just the engineers, but it has to be cross-functional. So you need to include the right people, craft the right relationships, and build momentum and trust through those small incremental wins. So migrating the marketing website may not seem like a huge milestone, but it really is the first step on that journey, which will go towards the end. Okay, that really concludes our presentation today. We hope it was helpful. So if you have any questions, please come talk to us at the booth, or also please do explore our migration landing page here. So we're actually currently offering a free, no strings attached, discovery and assessment if you're interested. So please snap a picture of this, and the QR code will take you to that page. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please enjoy the rest of the summit.